Folks, it's time to talk about a potential Patrik Laine trade, what the return could be, does he even move, all of that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jeff Foster, here to bring you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Playoffs are winding down, or have wound down, really. So the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all their customers with a booster or bonus every single day. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, Patrik Laine is the last kind of big red flashing thing on Don Waddell's to-do list. Obviously, the Cole Sillinger contract is still out there, but that feels like more of a certainty. I don't have any kind of real inside knowledge on how that's going, but if I had to guess, it's 80% of the way there, and they're just figuring out the last little bits. Patrik Laine has been out of the program for 4 days, 5 days, less than a week, I'm pretty sure. Because I believe it was the tail end of last week that he kind of came out of the NHLPA program for substance abuse and mental health. He is training. He's feeling good, which frankly is the most important thing for him. And now we look at his future in the NHL, which sounds really dramatic. He obviously has a future in the NHL. It's just, where is it going to be? Unlikely that it's going to be with Columbus. Like I talked on today's Locked On NHL, actually, with the host Gil Martin over there, that I'm 75% to 80% sure that Laine is traded before October. I think he's made up his mind. I think he wants a fresh start. I don't know that he was necessarily unhappy in Columbus specifically, but he was unhappy where he was. I don't think it was the fact that it was Columbus. I think had he been anywhere, he would have been equally unhappy. Didn't help that the team was losing, but, a lot going on for Laine. A lot of injuries the past couple of seasons. Obviously, his father passing away had a huge impact on him that I don't ever really see people mention in terms of, what his general mental health and well-being is like. So likely on the move. There is a world in which Patrik Laine is not traded, that he comes out of the program, that he talks to Don Waddell, that he talks to Dean Everson, that he talks to teammates. They try and convince him to stay. He realizes that maybe he can get a fresh start in Columbus with new coach, new GM, new look. It's unlikely, but it's there, and I talked about this a little bit in I believe it when I was talking to Jeff Svoboda about this last week, in that he made the trade when he was in a really bad place. Oh, he made the trade request, excuse me, while he was in a pretty bad place, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, what have you. Now that he's in a much better place, is he going to look and say, oh, okay, the reason I was so miserable is because of X, Y, and Z, which had nothing to do with Columbus. I just thought I would be happier if I was somewhere else. And that's a thought that I have had many, many times in my life. Oh, I'm unhappy in this place. I'll leave this place. Oh, I'm still unhappy. Maybe it wasn't the place after all. I think it's unlikely. I think he's probably put quite a bit of thought into this. And I feel like the first person that he's probably going to talk to, or, that his agent will talk to now that he's out of the program, has got to be Don Waddell, right? And say, listen, we still want to go. We still want to move. Can we start facilitating this? And the Blue Jackets gave Laine permission, or Laine's agent permission, I guess, to start talking to other teams. They gave other teams permission to reach out to Laine. I think they want to decide kind of on a trade that is going to be beneficial for the Blue Jackets in that they will get a decent return, and also that they're not trading Laine somewhere that he doesn't want to be. I'm just pulling up the Blue Jackets Wikipedia page right now because I believe that Patrik Laine has a modified no move clause. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, so he has a 10-team no trade list. So I don't believe he's been asked for that list. He could have been, but I think right now we're in that stage of teams are reaching out and saying, "Hey, do you want to come and play here?" And if he says yes, then they'll reach out to Don Waddell. It's no use teams like just pull a team out of nothing. The Senators, for example. If they call him and are like, "Hey, do you want to come and play in Ottawa?" and he says no, then there's no point in the Senators kind of reaching out to Don Waddell and saying, "Hey, we want to trade for Laine," because he could very easily just kind of put the Senators on his no trade list, and then that is a non-starter. Obviously, teams can waive their no trade for players can waive their no move or their no trade clause for teams. There was Jacob Markstrom, I believe he had a full no move clause in his contract, and he waived that to go to New Jersey. Linus Ullmark, I believe. Oh no, actually, I don't think Ullmark waived his. I think he didn't have Ottawa on his no move clause. But point remains, there are cases where teams will reach out to a player or they'll reach out to a team and the player will say, "Well, they're on my no trade list, but actually, yeah, okay, I'll waive it. Like, my feelings about this team have changed since I submitted that list." I don't know off the top of my head whether lists are submitted like at the beginning of the season or whether they are submitted like a team asks for them and then they have them, and once the team has them, the player can't change that. I know there was a big thing about Jacob Trouba being asked for his list of teams that he didn't want to be traded to. So lots of question marks in terms of where Laine is going to go, who's going to reach out for him. I know that the big rumors are going back to Winnipeg. He's very good friends with Nikolai Ehlers, who is kind of maybe on the way out in Winnipeg, but I don't know if the team is hoping, hey, let's get hold of Patrik Laine, and maybe that will change Ehlers' feelings on staying in Winnipeg. Montreal also big on Laine. They could use another goal scoring wing. Who can't use a goal scoring wing? I know that Laine never really kind of reached his full potential with the Blue Jackets, but we saw kind of flashes of that, 44, 45 goal scorer that he was when he was 19, and I don't know that he's been fully healthy and like in a really good place his entire time in Columbus. There was a point, not last season, but the season before, I think, where he had like 20 goals in 22 games or something like that. He is capable of being a really great player. I just don't know if he's going to be a really great player in Columbus. So that's kind of how all of that is going to shake out. What I imagine is over the next kind of couple of weeks, we'll start hearing so-and-so reached out, so this other team reached out, this third team reached out. I don't have a list off the top of my head of teams that have the cap space for Laine, because something we're going to talk about in a minute here is the return for Laine, which has changed a little bit, it's changed quite drastically, actually, in terms of what the Blue Jackets want to get back for Laine, and we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I want to tell you all about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop, but playoffs are in the rearview mirror. Summer is in full swing, so we're going to get fewer games. The sports aren't sportsing like I want them to, but FanDuel is going to let me keep the sports going whenever I want, and they're going to do the same thing for you. All we've got to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime we're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So you can use that boost or that bonus to bet on Dean Everson winning the Jack Adams, for example, or Johnny Gaudreau winning the Hart, or Elvis Merzlikins winning the Vezina. I don't know. I'm just throwing random bet considerations out there. You can do all of this, though, at FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and also us, the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking all about Patrik Laine today, and we've talked a little bit about kind of what has to happen before he's traded, or before, conversations about the trade even really need to start. But let's say teams have reached out to Laine, then you've got GMs calling Don Waddell up and saying, hey, we'd like to trade for Patrik Laine. Well, what is Don Waddell going to ask for in return? The original ask was, we're looking at a roster player to replace Laine, which makes sense on a couple of levels. Laine is a big chunk of cap, and if the Blue Jackets don't want to retain, they're probably going to have to take a contract on in return, or they want a player that, is going to take up cap space moving forward. So, for example, Marty Necas is an RFA right now. There was talk that maybe flip Laine to Carolina for the rights to Marty Necas. Marty Necas signed that big 8-year contract that we're all assuming that he's going to sign in Columbus, and there's your Laine money, or some of it. And this works out because, as we kind of talked about yesterday, the Blue Jackets still have almost $11 million in cap space. That's with Cole Sillinger to sign. But if they manage to move all of Laine's contract, then they've got $20 million in cap space. So, there is the chance that they can take a bad contract on in return. Don't have them off the top of my head in terms of what I personally think I would be looking for is potentially trading Laine for one for someone who is in the last year of a contract. The money's on the books this year, but then it comes off next year. The Blue Jackets have the cap space. And if they do that straight up, then they can probably get, they can get out from underneath the Laine contracts. And I feel like they could probably get something in return as well. But I wonder if, obviously this isn't a 1-year contract left, but I wonder if, something like the New York Rangers and that Trouba contract, which is just brutal. I'm just pulling that up now. Well, okay, he's making $8 million for the next 2 years, but they don't want him in New York. I don't necessarily want him on the Blue Jackets, but that might be something that the team looks at is, hey, we want to get rid of Trouba. We'll take Laine's contract in return, and we'll give you something else for your trouble. And whether that something else is like a prospect, whether it's a pick, I don't know. But there's some things to work with there, I don't think that that's a particularly likely one, but it was just the first big contract that a team is trying to move that kind of popped out there. So that's an option. That being said, the Blue Jackets aren't looking for a roster player. I think adding Sean Monahan into the mix means that they've we're going to knock on wood here. They've fixed their center depth questions now. With, they've gone from Boone Jenner as their 1C to, potentially having Sean Monahan as their 1C, or what is, I think is more likely, Adam Fantilli as your 1C, Sean Monahan as your 2nd-C, Cole Sillinger is your 3rd, and then probably Sean Corrali as your 4th. And then you also have Dmitry Voronkov can play center. Boone Jenner can play center if you need him to. They have depth. They have versatility in the lineup. Swapping a winger out for another center is going to get in the way of the development of the young players like Fantilli. It's just not what they want right now. And I think if there was anything that they were going to ask for, they're pretty set on defense. There's a couple of holes that we expect to be patched with younger players. Goaltending is another option, potentially. But again, I think they look like they're pretty set on going into the season with Merzlikins and Tarasov as their duo, which we'll see how that goes. Don Waddell has talked about how he wants to try and get Elvis back to where they think Elvis can be. And If not, I think this is probably his last chance in Columbus. If they can get him back to kind of that rookie season, sophomore season level, who knows? All bets are off. But as of right now, I don't think Elvis is an option for trading. And then obviously that means that they don't want to trade for a goalie. Unless they can move the Elvis contract, they're not trading for a goalie because they aren't. So they're not getting a roster player in return. What they're asking for are picks and prospects, or picks and or prospects, which I am more than fine with. This team is probably still a year or two away from, that first round pick being in the 20s, or potentially trading away a first round pick to add to the roster, things like that. I'm expecting their first round pick this year to probably be between 10 and 15. That feels like it'll be a successful season if they pick between 10 and 15 in the or 11, 16, whatever. Basically not being a lottery pick, but there probably won't be a playoff pick either. So more picks is always a good thing. Especially, if you're going to get, you have your 10 to 15 pick, and then you have another between 10 and 25 pick, or 10 and 32 pick, whatever, another later first round pick. There's a couple of teams here that have kind of been the most linked to Laine. One of those is the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, we've talked kind of at length about that. Would Patrik Laine want to go back to the Jets? That's not necessarily a fresh start, but it is an option. I know the team would take him back. He's obviously in a much better place than he was when he left. They've got one of his close friends there, as does another team who we'll talk about in a second here. But is this an option? If it is, what is the return going to be like? And I've kind of been banging let's just do Laine for McGrorty straight up. They would have to do some cap shenanigans to make that work. The Winnipeg Jets only have $5.5 million or $5.8 million in space. So does the Blue Jackets retain 50% of Laine's salary? So he only costs 4.3-ish. Do they take a different contract on? I'm wondering if they take I don't know. They might take that Neil Pionk contract on. It would be a stupid idea, but they could do it. I wonder if they take on, something like an Adam Lowry contract, or a Nino Niederreiter contract, or they retain a bunch of salary and the Blue Jackets get it again, a pick for their troubles. In terms of what the Winnipeg Jets have with their picks, they've got their first round picks for the next 3 drafts, excuse me. They've got they don't have a second or a fourth next year. The year after that, they don't have a fourth, and then the year after that, they've got all of them. So I wonder if Patrik Laine 50% retained for Rutger McGrorty and a second round pick, maybe. That's kind of my thinking. The Blue Jackets might send a fourth or a fifth back just to kind of even it out. I'm always fascinated about the late round picks, and where they're yeah, why not? Well, would you do a fifth round pick? And they're no, we'll do a sixth, because at that point it's really kind of up in the air. But that could be kind of a potential trade for Winnipeg. And then the other main team that's kind of been talked about is the Montreal Canadiens. I saw someone on Twitter say that they saw Patrik Laine and his agent in Montreal. I don't know how true that is. They also don't really have a ton of cap space right now. They've got $7.9 million, but I actually talked to the hosts of Locked On Canadiens, my wonderful friends, Scott and Laura over there, and they suggested something like, do the Blue Jackets take a player like Jordan Harris, who's making $1.4 million this year, and something else? Or, again, do the Blue Jackets retain and then take Philip Machar is a guy that I have kind of had my eye on as a prospect that I would, is it Patrik Laine, 25, 33, 50% retained in return for Philip Machar, and make that trade 1-for-1? I would probably do that if we're retaining salary. I would probably want Meisha and stuff. So like potentially, here's another option that I thought about. Do they take someone like Philip Meisha and then Jacob Fowler is an excellent goalie prospect that's likely out of the running. He's one of the untouchable prospects that I talked to about with Scott. Also untouchable, Demidov, obviously, Ryan Backer, someone else, Lane Hudson, probably Fowler. Those are untouchable prospect. I feel like Owen Beck is potentially untouchable. Joshua Waugh is untouchable, but there's a couple of solid B tier goalie prospects. So I wonder if the Blue Jackets snatch up one of them. So do Meisha and maybe Quentin Miller from the QMJHL. He had a really good season with the Quebec Rampart and then got traded to the Rimouski Oceanique. And again, had a very solid back half of the season for them. There's also Yevgeny Volokin, who is in the VHL right now, which is it's like the AHL of Russia. Essentially, is how I always kind of think of it. It's not quite a 1-for-1 comparison, but like that's also an option there. So I wonder if Laine 50% retained for Meisha and let's just say Quentin Miller, a goaltending prospect, and then the Blue Jackets get another goalie for their pool. You can never have too many goalie prospects. I'm a big fan of Philip Meisha. The worst case scenario, he is excellent for Cleveland, who is kind of still a little bit kind of disemboweled after all of the UFAs and veterans left this summer. But that would also be like my main want for this is still Rutger McGrotty, and it's probably going to be that. But if he goes to Montreal, like my thing with Montreal is I don't want I hesitate to say garbage in return, but there are a lot of people that are saying, oh, well, we'll give them Josh Anderson and David Savard for Patrik Laine. And no, that's just straight up. No, I don't want that. I would take Kirby Dach in a second, but they wouldn't do that trade. I would probably take Alex Newhook, but they wouldn't do that trade. There's moving parts, etc. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of the two main contenders right now, as more teams are kind of coming out and saying, yeah, we've got interest, or, the insiders are like, hey, we've heard that they're talking to the Nashville Predators, for example. I don't know that the Nashville Predators have anything approaching any cap space after their free agency. Vegas, I assume, will be in the mix. There's lots of different, again, moving parts, but we'll see. As teams kind of come out and as interested, we'll talk about what a return could look like for Laine from that. We're going to finish up in just a second here, and I want to take a really quick look at it. This is something I took a little bit of a look at yesterday. At the top 6 for the Blue Jackets this season, both with Patrik Laine and without Patrik Laine. And it's not like a huge change, but I'll tell you what I mean by that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking Patrik Laine. We're talking about the Blue Jackets and what their top 6 could look like in October, depending on is Patrik Laine there or not. My guess is that he's probably not, but I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that he is. So we'll take a quick look at what it would look like with him first. And this is kind of the easy one, because if you add Patrik Laine in, then that's definitely a top 6 talent. So again, I still think that Gaudreau, Monahan, Marchenko is the line. The Laine Gaudreau connection doesn't work for whatever reason. They have negative chemistry together. It made me feel insane every time they got put back together. This also frees Patrik Laine up to play his natural position on the left side, because he'll be playing on, I'm going to say the second line, but I don't really mean the second line. The top 6, I assume. The Monahan line and the Fantilli line will probably flip-flop all season as to who's the top and who's the second line. But Gaudreau, Monahan, Marchenko, I think, is a line. Just because they don't really have anyone else to go on that line. Maybe Chinakhov gets a shot there, but for my money, that's Marchenko's spot to lose, You know, he and Gaudreau had some decent chemistry at times this season when they got to play together. And I like that. I like that combo a bunch. Obviously, the Monahan-Gaudreau connection hopefully is still there. So it's just kind of a case of seeing how Monahan and Marchenko gel together, which Marchenko can shoot through the hole in a Cheerio. So hopefully good things. Then you kind of look at the second line, and I had kind of been penciling in the second line to be something along the lines of Fantilli, Brindley, Johnson. That's kind of my choice for a second line. I think, again, the Fantilli, Brindley connection you have to go with. I think Kent Johnson will work really well with those two players. With Patrik Laine in the mix, though, I wonder if, with Patrik Laine in the mix, what happens is that Brindley likely goes to the AHL. I don't think he plays further down in the lineup because I don't think that there's any kind of real benefit to him playing in the bottom six. He's a top six player. And frankly, I would rather have him dominating in the AHL, playing, 20 minutes a night than playing 14 minutes a night or less on a third and fourth line for the Blue Jackets. So we'll swap Laine in for Brindley. So, but then I don't know if Johnson, Fantilli, Laine is the line that you necessarily want to go with either. Frustrating because, again, I don't think Kent Johnson is a guy that is going to particularly thrive lower down the lineup, but I don't know that Laine, Fantilli, Johnson is a line that is going to work. Maybe this is me forgetting because I'm saying this and I'm also thinking, did they play together a whole bunch this season and have it not be a disaster? I liked Fantilli and Laine playing together when Fantilli was playing in center. And I like the concept of Fantilli and Johnson. Again, I don't know how much they played together, which is something I am looking up as we speak. But in terms of players that played together, so we're looking at Fantilli, Johnson, Bemstrom. That's not correct. Laine, Fantilli, Texier. That's not correct. Fantilli, Jenna, Rostovic. No. Laine, Fantilli, Voronkov. Texier, Fantilli, Bemstrom. None of these are what I'm looking for. Laine, Jenna, Chinikov. No. Laine, Fantilli, Danforth. There's Laine, Jenna, Gaudreau. Did they really not play those guys together? That's wild to me. Let's look at it this way. Fantilli, Jenna Rosovic, Fantilli, Voronkov, Marchenko. No. Johnson, Fantilli, Bemstrom. No. Okay, so Johnson only played with Fantilli or Bemstrom, Rostovic or Bemstrom, Sillinger or Bemstrom. Maybe that's why Johnson didn't have a very good year. It's because he got stuck with Emil Bemstrom anytime he was on the ice. Sillinger and Danforth, and then Voronkov, Marchenko. So no, those players, and then Laine, Fantilli, Danforth, Fantilli, Texier, Fantilli, Voronkov. So, no, those three players didn't play together this season. They probably should have done, and I would like to see it in training camp. I just don't know how well it would work. So now I'm like, okay, do you move Johnson down the lineup, put him on the third line with Voronkov and Chinikov, let's say, move Jenna up and do Jenna, Fantilli, Laine? I still don't know that works. Again, I don't remember if that was an option that they did this season. Just kind of, again, flipping back and forth between all of that. No, I don't believe they did. So it's tricky. I don't know that this team works as well and reaches its potential as much with Laine in that top six, which is frustrating. Because he clearly has the skill level, he has the talent, he's a good player. I just don't know that he fits. I don't know that he fits into what the Blue Jackets are going to do this season, especially now that they've picked up Monahan. Laine should move back to wing if Dean Everson is worth his salt as a coach, which again, I guess we'll find out. But I'm still looking at this and I'm like, I can't find the right configuration of top six that works and has the players in the top six that need to be in the top six. So who can say? Obviously, we'll get more of an answer to this as time goes on, whether he gets traded or not. We are, I think, 6 weeks away from or 6 weeks or so away from the prospect tournament in Buffalo, which is going to be fun. And then immediately after that, I believe it's training camp. So we will get our answers in 6 to 7 weeks, and hopefully we'll get some fun answers to all of my questions. But that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow, let's talk about goaltending. Because The Athletic says that the Blue Jackets have the worst goaltending in the NHL, regardless of whether you talk about on-ice effect, tandem, save percentage, prospect pool, anything like that. So we'll talk about that in tomorrow's episode, because I have some thoughts, as I'm sure everyone is shocked to hear that I have thoughts on goaltending, but I do. We'll talk about them in tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms. I've forgotten how to talk. Free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube and on Sirius XM. Thank you for listening once again. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. Going to talk about goalies on tomorrow's show. And until then, make sure you stay locked on.